in the northern reaches of the world, beyond the familiar maps and comfortable cities, lay a stretch of land that locals called Avalon Ridge, a region of towering cliffs, whispering pines, and lakes as still as glass. For centuries, it had been considered unremarkable, a remote wilderness passed over by explorers who dismissed it as too ordinary to hide any secrets. But Avalon Ridge was not ordinary, and its secrets were waiting. Few knew that deep in this wilderness, inside the heart of a forgotten mountain, an ancient repository existed, an archive capable of rewriting the understanding of human history. For centuries, it remained undisturbed, sealed behind stone and silence, until one winter, an unusual discovery changed everything. A lone hiker stumbled upon a strange metallic structure, partially buried in the frost. Its surface shimmered faintly, as if reacting to his presence. The hiker touched it, and a pulse of light rippled across the surface, revealing a symbol no one had seen in thousands of years. The man never returned home. Authorities searched for weeks, but no trace of him was found. In the reports, he was listed simply as missing. In Avalon Ridge, however, nothing ever vanished without leaving a mark. The hiker's disappearance would soon ignite a chain of events that would awaken something ancient, something the world had forgotten. It began with a historian named Elias Rowan. Elias Rowan spent most of his life surrounded by manuscripts, artifacts, and the monotony of academic halls. Known as a meticulous researcher, he rarely sought adventure beyond dusty archives. Yet his life changed when an anonymous package arrived at his office. Inside it lay a single item, a thin metallic shard, cold to the touch, etched with the same symbol found in Avalon Ridge. Alongside, it was a note containing only a set of coordinates. Not a word more. The coordinates pointed to an isolated valley within Avalon Ridge, far from any trails, roads, or settlements. Something in the shard's craftsmanship disturbed Elias deeply. It was neither ancient nor modern, yet somehow both. It resonated with a faint hum when held near light. Within days, Elias packed his gear and set out toward Avalon Ridge, not knowing what awaited him, not knowing that the moment he crossed its borders, his life would diverge from everything he had ever imagined. The wilderness greeted him with vast, sweeping landscapes. Snow-laced mountains overshadowed endless forests, and the wind carried a strange stillness, as though the land itself was holding its breath. As he trekked deeper, he felt watched, not by animals or people, but by the land itself. At night, he dreamed of glowing corridors and towering structures buried beneath mountains. In these visions, something ancient stirred, a presence aware of him. The shard he carried glowed faintly. Whenever he approached the area indicated by the coordinates, Avalon Ridge was guiding him or calling him. Elias reached the valley after several days of navigating rough terrain. It was unlike any other part of the region. Towering stone walls encircled it, forming a natural amphitheater. Snow fell gently, but melted before touching the ground, vanishing into thin air with a soft hiss. The air was warmer here, unnaturally so. At the center of the valley lay an enormous fracture in the earth, an opening big enough to swallow a small house. From within, a faint metallic glow pulsed like a heartbeat. Elias approached carefully, sensing that this place was older than recorded civilization. As he descended into the fracture, the walls shifted from natural stone to smooth metallic surfaces. They were covered in engravings, spirals, lines, and patterns that pulsed with soft blue light. The shard he carried vibrated with increasing strength, guiding him through the dark. Soon he reached a massive circular door embedded into the rock. The symbol on the shard was etched across its surface. As he held the shard toward it, the door responded. Light coursed through its engravings, and an ancient mechanism hummed to life. The circular door split into segments and slid open, revealing a vast chamber beneath the mountain. Elias stepped inside. A world long thought impossible sprawled before him. An underground complex of interconnected platforms, towering columns, and crystalline structures that glowed like starlight. It resembled a city, though silent and uninhabited, a forgotten civilization preserved beneath the earth. At the center of the chamber stood a colossal monolith, emitting a soft, rhythmic glow. This was the archive, the place the hiker had died to discover, the place that now awaited Elias. As Elias approached the monolith, the entire chamber began to shift. Light cascaded along the floors and walls, racing toward the center of the room. Strands of energy flowed into the monolith, causing it to pulse brighter with each passing moment. Then the walls around him projected images, scenes from a world that seemed both familiar and foreign. He saw civilizations rising and falling, towers of impossible height stretching into the clouds, machines that defied physics, human beings mastering technologies far beyond anything known today. But the images didn't stop there. They continued until they reached a moment Elias couldn't comprehend. A catastrophic event that shattered the ancient world. A phenomenon resembling a wave of darkness swept across the land, collapsing cities, swallowing oceans, and disrupting the very fabric of time itself. The final image showed the ancient builders sealing the archive beneath the mountains, encoding their knowledge into crystalline structures just moments before the catastrophe struck. This archive wasn't merely historical. It was a warning. The darkness that destroyed the ancient world was not a natural disaster. It was an entity, one that consumed energy, knowledge, and time itself. As the archive awakened, Elias sensed that the entity was stirring once more. Avalon Ridge trembled. The mountains shuddered with deep, rumbling vibrations. Snow cascaded down their slopes in white avalanches. In the chamber, the monolith cracked, releasing bursts of energy that shot upward through the ceiling. Far above, a dark cloud spiraled into existence, unnatural, pulsing, and alive. The entity had sensed the archive's activation. Elias watched in awe and terror as the cloud coalesced, forming a mass that collapsed into the valley. The air grew heavy, and the world's color dimmed as though a shadow had swallowed the sun. He had awoken something that should have remained buried. The entity began descending into the fracture, drawn toward the archive's energy. As it drew near, the images on the walls flickered violently. The archive seemed to resist, activating defense mechanisms built thousands of years ago. Pillars of light emerged from the crystalline structures, forming protective barriers. The entity recoiled, but it pushed forward, determined to reach the monolith. Elias realized the truth. The shard he carried was not a key, it was a trigger. The moment he activated the archive, the entity sensed the awakening and returned. The ancient builders had sealed the archive not to protect it from the world, but to protect the world from what the archive was connected to. And now their efforts were undone. As the entity approached, the chamber reacted aggressively. Beams of light shot across the room, forming geometric barriers that shifted and reconfigured with every pulse. The floor split open to reveal conduits of glowing energy that surged upward, attempting to trap or repel the intruder. But the entity was incredibly powerful. It absorbed the energy directed at it, growing stronger with every strike. Elias sprinted across platforms as the entity lashed out with tendrils of shadow. The archive's defenses fired bursts of luminous energy that temporarily pushed the darkness back, giving Elias room to move. The monolith emitted a deep, resonant hum that shook the entire chamber. Elias' vision blurred as the shard in his hand glowed intensely. The shard was reacting to the monolith. A connection formed between them. The builders had left a fail-safe. The shard was not only a key, it was the archive's final command module. If used correctly, it could deactivate the entire structure, cutting off the entity's source of attraction, forcing it back into dormancy. But using it required getting close to the monolith. The entity was now guarding it. The entity's shadowy mass swirled violently, shattering platforms and tearing through defenses. Elias navigated the collapsing terrain, leaping across crumbling bridges and dodging bursts of corrupted energy. His breath grew shallow as the air thickened with the entity's presence. Avalon Ridge trembled again. Cracks split the valley floor. The sky darkened to a deep violet, and lightning surged across the clouds. Elias pushed forward, fighting exhaustion and fear. The monolith pulsed rapidly, its energy destabilizing. If he failed to reach it, the archive would collapse, and the entity would be unleashed upon the world. The chamber's defenses flickered, weakening. entity surged forth in one final push, enveloping the monolith in a cocoon of darkness. Elias reached the platform's edge just as everything around him began to collapse. With the last reserves of his strength, he thrust the shard into the monolith's central slot. The moment it connected, an explosion of light erupted from the core. The entity screamed silently as its form began to unravel. The light intensified, expanding outward into a sphere that consumed both the monolith and the entity. Crystalline structures shattered. The chamber walls ruptured. The valley above split open as a column of blinding brilliance shot skyward. Avalon Ridge became a beacon of pure white light, and then it all stopped. Silence, stillness, darkness. When the light faded, the valley was unrecognizable. The fracture was sealed, the metallic structures buried once again beneath tons of stone and earth. The unnatural warmth faded, replaced by the cold bite of winter. Elias lay unconscious on the valley floor, the shard reduced to dust near his hand. He awoke hours later beneath a pale morning sun. The entity was gone. The monolith had vanished. The archive was sealed for another age, buried deeper than before. Avalon Ridge looked untouched, as though nothing had ever happened. Something felt different. The air was clearer, the sky brighter, the world quieter. Elias knew he had stopped the entity for now, but the archive's warning echoed in his mind. The catastrophe of the ancient world had not been a single event. It had been cyclic, recurring over millennia whenever the entity stirred. By activating the archive, he had merely delayed the inevitable. The world would face the entity again one day. But when that day came, humanity would not be unaware. Elias carried with him fragments of knowledge, visions of ancient technologies, hints of lost civilizations, and cryptic messages encoded in the archive. He made his way down the valley, determined to ensure the world would be ready. Avalon Ridge returned to silence. Deep beneath its mountains, in chambers beyond human reach, a soft pulse of light flickered again, steady, slow, patient. The archive was not destroyed, only sleeping, waiting for the next seeker.